So, welcome, Kenneth, to the Gift of Psychosynthesis. I imagine probably many people watching this will be pretty familiar with you and your work. But for those who aren't, um, I'm just going to have a go at trying to describe you and who you are and why you're well known in the psychosynthesis community.
Mm.
Um, you're the author of many books, but this one in particular, which we're going to be discussing today, which is The Soul of Psychosynthesis, which is an
Yes.
absolute
Yeah.
classic.
Look at
Um,
you, very young here.
yeah, very young. There he was in his prime. You're also obviously a psychotherapist and you've got an MA in psychosynthesis, but you're probably also very well known now for your YouTube channel, which has been going for a while. I think that's on, I'm going to say on psychosynthesis and perhaps self mastery and meditation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And also because you're multi-talented, you're a speaker at conferences and a workshop facilitator. And I should just say as well that Lara and I were lucky enough to meet you
Mm.
this summer, just ending, I suppose, in the Netherlands, and it was at the European Psychosynthesis Association summer school, and you were doing a workshop, I want to say, on the will, and it
Mm.
was absolutely brilliant. And we also got a chance to meet with you, hang out with you, and chat with you as well. And it was just a really good experience. So yeah, we're really pleased. And one final thing I'll say as well is I don't think I told you before, but when I was doing my essays for my therapy training,
Mm.
I came across your articles in those days. I
Yeah.
didn't know your YouTube channel, and I
Mm.
was reading them, and they were just a gift of clarity, basically, about what psychosynthesis is. So I thought, yeah, and I was citing them all the time. So I never thought a few
Mm.
years later I would actually be meeting you and talking to you. So it's great. So welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you.
So
Thank you.
I've had my go at trying to say who you are, but I think the first thing is who is Kenneth Sorensen? How would you describe yourself?
That's a big, that's a big topic.
Or maybe what would you like people to know about you, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We can start with the outer self, the outer persona, and uh, like many of us that joins psychotherapy or any kind of psychology, but uh, more the kind of psychology that really believes that you can change yourself. Then I also started my path into, yeah, it actually started with astrology and then moved into theosophy and then came
Mm.
psychosynthesis. But I think the main thing that got me into psychosynthesis and all we could call it personal and spiritual development was simply agony, pain, suffering,
Mm.
self-loathing, just trying to dig myself out of a very sense of despair because I simply didn't know who who I was
Mm.
and was quite socially isolated and had social anxiety and so all the regular limitations were put on me and then I started becoming interested in astrology, and I had a very good astrology teacher, and the very first who did my chart, and he said something very simple to me. He said, "Kenneth, you don't know yourself. You're not there." He was also a trained psychotherapist. When I tune into you and try to ask you questions, you slip away. You have to dig in and find who you are. Then your life will be much, much better. And of course, you could see in my
Mm.
chart that I have a grand trine in water, and that was, potential to really explore the depth of the psyche. And he gave me one advice: start psychotherapy and start meditating. These
Mm.
were the two advice. And then, I come from a working class environment, so there was no prepping there into psychology or spirituality, nothing at all. but it was just something resonated in me at that time. Of course, pure pain is a beautiful motivator because it really keeps you in the fire. And if you don't choose drugs and all these escapes mechanisms, then you're just faced with your own misery and you have to find out what's going on. And he proposed meditation. He called it the sun in the heart. And it was very, very simple. He said, Kenneth, in your heart center, there is a sun, and you can meditate on that sun, you can rest in that sun. And from that sun, uh, everything you want in life emanates. If you want more love, then tune into love. If you want more trust or power, whatever, you can connect with this living being within you. And it was so simple, a sun in the heart, just sit down, close your eyes, be mindful of your breath, and then start. Of course, in the start, it was visualizing the sun, but it was also just the start of me taking it serious, sitting down and start doing this exercise. And gradually, I start feeling as a sense of love, a sense of openness, a sense of self-care, sense of acceptance. Everything that I've looked for on the outside, I started finding within myself. And it was a big, big revelation that such a simple method could help me dig myself out of, yeah, false identifications, your identification with my background, identification with my lack of skills, and all these false identifications that in some way trap me into a very closed mind. So I will say it all started there in '88. This was when I started my meditation practice, and I hit a nerve there. I would call it my inner mystic. There was an inner sub personality that was already embedded within me. In Vedanta, they speak about samskaras. These imprint we have in the unconscious from former lifetime. I believe, this simple exercise simply put me on track. And then it just evolved. I got very passionate about astrology. I got very passionate about theosophy. Within theosophy, I came upon Roberto Assagioli's name and especially his book, The Act of Will. And then, short story, in the beginning of in the late '90s, I realized I was still fucked up. I had all these big ideas, but I couldn't practice them. And all my dreams and my endeavor were just limited also by the people around me. They also had big dreams and big ideas, but could not live them. So a lot of conflicts emerged, and I just realized I have to really do some solid psychotherapeutic work again. And then I just decided I'm starting this psychosynthesis journey now, and then signing up for 4-year training, and then I'm here 25 years later, and I'm still digging myself out of all these false identifications. But I'm in a much better place, that's for sure. That's the short version.
I think it's interesting because the one thing that I I was thinking as I was listening to you is it's quite uncommon though to stick with something, practice and really keep going with it. I heard obviously like me, you would look at other things. We both have a shared interest in astrology. You looked at that, but it seems like that common thread was that self-analysis that just wasn't going away, and that started off just from just pure the meditation with the heart, with the sun in the heart, but it kept going through all the other things that you were doing, which I just kind of I think that's a bit of a lesson there. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but if you have a constitution where you, on the one side, have a deep longing of becoming whole, becoming more of what you could be, and you are still having a lot of pains and anxiety, limitation. Then you have this duality. It's kind of a crisis of duality. You sense your potential and you cannot live them, and that type of it's a it's it's a kind of developmental pain. And if you really understand that there is a solution, I'm a very practical guy. My mother and father, my father worked within the building industry, so he was very earthy, and my mother was cleaning toilets. So you see, I come from, but what they taught me was hard work. If you do hard work, you can accomplish something, and they did accomplish something. That's for sure. So that mentality of just taking one step at a time and then continue. And of course, if you're doing the right thing, you get the benefits. You suddenly discover, wow, I'm not that anxious anymore. Wow, I can actually have a good conversation with a normal human being without feeling inhibited. So I think the benefits is in the practice. If you really and I have a deep passion of both both my own liberation, I would call it liberation, but also to see other people liberate themselves. I've been having a full-time clinical practice, and watching people take steps of liberation is just so fulfilling, and both being with them in their deepest pain and also sharing the joy when they finally divorce, or they finally shift to a better job, or they finally just enter into the unknown and start navigating from there. I think it's just such a promise to what we can be as an individual, but also as a humanity.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I'm with many things, but it really resonates with me what you're sharing in terms of also about your parents being hardworking and this ethics and the will, the drive of doing your best and working. Because what you're describing at the beginning, this person who did your chart, he gave you an advice, but that advice doesn't always work, but you took it really at heart, and you saying it's because of the pain you were, but you didn't just like achieve something and stopped. Like, and what I hear is this influence from what you learned from your parents, perhaps, or your own will. You kept going, you're learning more, and you saw there was another step and more to learn. And I hear also, and we were planning to ask that later, but what I hear already is about your mission. You're already talking about that. So if you could say a bit more, because at the beginning it was your personal development, you coming out of the pain, you growing, you connecting with yourself. But what is your mission? And you already spoke a little bit about that. But, yeah.
I believe my mission is definitely to bring people the life skills that can help them unfold who they are, becoming more free, becoming more liberated human beings, able to connect and create a better world. And I have this vision. It's the same vision as Jolie, interest net, this vision that we are all interconnected, but we are all like jewels in that net, and we have to find our own cosmic address in life. We have to find where we in some way can fulfill our destiny. In Hinduism, they talk much about Dharma, and Dharma is duty. And what is our duty? Our duty is to be ourselves. Our duty is not to walk in another man's path. Our duty is to find what kind of gift do I have to bring to the world in order to create a better world. And I've chosen psychosynthesis as my primary toolbox, because I find both the philosophy and the wisdom in psychosynthesis so promising because it's based on facts of consciousness. This is what Assagioli speaks about, the seven core experiences. There's a simplicity to psychosynthesis. When you have first grasped and understood the core essence of psychosynthesis, that you can be, synthesis is about becoming whole in yourself, but it's also about creating wholeness outside of yourself, good families, good communities, a better world where we respect nature and animals and all living beings within it. This is a big vision, but it's psychosynthesis is more than a vision. It's also a psychospiritual practice. Something it give us the tools to find these inner realities that psychosynthesis is based on, the seven core experiences of psychosynthesis. And this is what I'm doing when I'm teaching, when I'm doing psychotherapy, when I work with myself. It's always based on these fundamental experiences, because if you have found that center within yourself where you can observe what's going on inside of yourself, you have found your will, your mission, and your purpose in life, then you become an agent for good.
Yeah.
And we need much more people who are agents for good and who are able to have critical thinking and stand up for themselves, speak their minds, especially in a time of today where there are so many demagogues out there that stow fear and misery. We really need strong persons who can stand up for what is right and just and good. And I think psychosynthesis carry that toolbox to achieve that.
Yeah, I think you're talking also to a moral imperative. Once you know and you're doing this work, and you have a responsibility to allow it to the ripple effects of it to
Yes, and it's a joyful responsibility
yeah.
because being yourself is the most joyful you can be. There's simply nothing that matches. It's
But the
simply
journey there can be really hard.
yes, definitely, definitely. That's why you do the journey,
Yeah.
because you open up small windows to what you gradually become more able to perceive and experience within yourself. And the vision is you are actually a divine being. You are capable of, perhaps not in a lifetime, but you are capable of becoming a fully embodied spiritual being. And Assagioli also give us an understanding of why we suffer due to our false identification with our surface self, identification with cultural roles, social roles, and all these external factors.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was so interesting. I had to put the mute on for a bit. There's building work going on outside, so if you're hearing a lot of rumbling, apologies. Yeah, just picking up on that point about Dharma. It's just so central. It is probably the thing we all have to do. It's not so discussed in the West, although increasingly it's being more talking about. But finding your own identity, it's an ongoing process, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
ongoing. You're always being bombarded by other influences that are trying to knock you out of who you really are.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk a little bit then about the book, because this is obviously part of your Dharma as well, was writing this book, because it's been such a big influence in the psychosynthesis community. Here it is again, the soul of psychosynthesis. So you identify in it 7 core experiences that Assagioli, the founder of psychosynthesis, believed that we all have to really understand if we're going to understand ourselves.
Yeah.
And we were going to talk today a little bit about 3 of them, the first 3 that you cover in the book, which are disidentification, which Lara's going to ask you about in a second, personal self, and the will. So I'm just wondering whether you could just give us a brief history of the genesis of the book? Why did you write it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. During my training and the following year, I graduated with an MA in 2008. So that in some way concluded my formal training. But during this training, reading a lot of books and joining many seminars and conferences and yeah, just hanging out with people, I realized that in my opinion, there was a lack of understanding what psychosynthesis in its essence is, formulated by Roberto Assagioli. And I also realized the diversity of the psychosynthesis community. And it's no surprise that there's a big diversity when it comes to an understanding of what is the you could call it, what's the ontological ground, what is the basic premises, what is the principles that psychosynthesis is based on. And many teachers and many people have various ideas. Some is very influenced by Buddhism, and in Buddhism there's no permanent self. And if you come from a Buddhist angle, you will create a type of psychosynthesis that is very, very different than Assagioli's version of psychosynthesis. Some are very inspired by psychoanalytic thought, object relation theory, and stuff like that, and they also tend to be more aligned with that model than the core essence of psychosynthesis. So I felt a deep need to articulate what the core meaning of psychosynthesis is from Assagioli's point of view. So I recognize that there can be various ways of practicing synthesis because I see that synthesis is what brings all the ways together. This is the combining principle. Everyone, I've never met a person within psychosynthesis that were not working for some kind of a wholeness, some kind of a synthesis. That's the general principle of it all. And as Assagioli speaks both of personal and transpersonal psychosynthesis, but also the synthesis of humanity and even cosmic synthesis. So the evolutionary drive toward wholeness, I believe everyone in the psychosynthesis community have. But when it comes to the details, the understanding of what is the self, what is will, and how do we develop the self, then you have big, 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 big questions.
Yeah.
And at first I was taken a bit back by it because I thought, how can people be so far away from Assagioli's conception of it? But again, then the older you get, the wiser sometimes you get. Then you find, okay, but if psychosynthesis is also about psychosynthesis of humanity, then we have to allow for differences. We have to allow for diversity. But what we cannot allow is that we mix them all together and say they are the same. We have to be able to distinguish, and this is also a way of honoring the various approaches to synthesis. But we have to be able to distinguish one path from another. It's like comparing Christianity and Buddhism. There can be some similarities, but there are also big differences. And you will find the same when you dig into it. So this was actually my motivating factor for writing the book, and it took its outset in the paper on training that Assagioli dictated 3 months before his death. And I believe it was either Piero Ferrucci or it was Frank Hilton who took the notes down. I'm about to investigate that in this moment because I'm actually writing a biography of Roberto Assagioli at the moment. But in this paper, Assagioli named 7 fundamental facts And without these facts, there can be no psychosynthetic training. So he points to some experiences that anyone who practice psychosynthesis must have the experience of disidentification, the self, the will, the ideal model, synthesis, the superconscious, and the higher self. So his whole philosophy and vision and psychospiritual practice is based on something you can find as a fact within yourself. So it's not a theory. Of course, it's also a concept. It's a concept about reality. But a concept is never reality itself. It's only pointing to the reality. So his claim is that anyone who's practicing these techniques, they can have the experience of the self, disidentification, the will, and the other core experiences. So that was really something I became very passionate about, because it was also very close to my own experiences, because I have had a full-on meditation practice since '88. In the start, it was in the Heart Center. Later, it was more a witnessing practice. So I believe I've had these experiences that he's pointing to. So it was just a deep felt you could felt a feeling of duty that I wanted to highlight Assagioli's experiences and his perennialistic way to synthesis. That was the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of those things that he talked about, those 7, they will all obviously contribute to the theme you just talked about, which is one's Dharma. You need to put all those 7 things in place to be able to follow one's Dharma. Sorry, over to you.
And it sounds like you're doing your Dharma, your Bhakti Yoga, doing what you are called to. So thank you for the book. I like Jamie, I also use the book a lot for my essays and for my thesis, my MA thesis. And I wrote a chapter on identification and disidentification using very personal experience, that very painful experience that I was really over-identified at the time. And I would like you to say a bit about the chapter on disidentification, which you say it's the way to freedom. And if you could explain also in a way for people who are studying, or students, trainees, and maybe, thank you.
Disidentification is, in Assagioli's words, the mother of all the techniques. The first point in his paper on training, there are 12 points. And the first point is about the techniques. It's about experimentation. So he points to, we have to experiment. Psychosynthesis claim that there is this self of pure awareness, pure self-awareness. There is this self, this center within you. Psychosynthesis present the idea that, we had all these multiple conflicting inner energies, sub-personalities that fight for our awareness, and pull us in various directions. But we also have a center, and in normal psychology they call it the ego. In psychosynthesis we call it the I, or the personal self. And this personal self has a big job and many problems in trying to master all these various conflicting inner forces in us. And everyone who has just done a bit of introspection will become aware of these inner conflicts between various. Some part of us wants to be with the family, another part of us wants to do a career, and then we have the battle between how much time do I spend in the family, how much time do I spend in pursuing my career. That's a very well-known inner conflict. And Assagioli claimed that there is a center within ourselves, and this center is a center of pure self-awareness and will. In order to understand this or have an experience of this self, we need to understand the differences between subpersonalities and the pure self. Our subpersonalities, our various roles we play in life as parent, as a teacher, as a husband, as we play so many roles in life, formal and informal roles. These are our outer identity, and we need those roles. This is how we interact with the world. Of course, we need to be a father and a good father, but these are roles. They are not our true being according to psychosynthesis. But we need to develop these roles, these external identities with authentic qualities. So in my relation to my daughter, I have a 5-year-old daughter and also have an older daughter, 25-year-old. I try to develop authentic qualities in my parental role. I want Kenneth to show up as a father. And and for me to be able to do that, I have to investigate where am I coming from when I interact with my children, because I'm influenced by my father and my mother. They have been role models, and there could also be other adults in my childhood that play that role. So in some way, that's been my experience as a father. Suddenly I hear myself say stuff that I'm not believing in, and then I have to investigate. Why did I say that? Where did that emotion come from? Why did I get so angry just because she said that? And then when I start peeling layers off, I see, wow, that's my inner father. And I will come to disidentification because this is the
No,
practice
this
we
is a
have to do.
brilliant background to understand the
Yes,
identification and disidentification. Thank you.
because at some point when I had my first daughter, I had really bad conscience all the time with my father role, because I felt I was a lousy father. I couldn't live up to what I instinctively felt I should be. And then I had a psychotherapeutic session. I had several sessions. And at some point, she asked me, well, what is your ideal model of fatherhood? An ideal model is your inner image of what a good father is. And then, bing, up in my head, I saw a father figure, my own father with a pipe in his mouth and washing his Volvo Amazon, and children playing around. He has plenty of time just doing his practical stuff, and he did everything with pleasure that I didn't like to do. I hate washing my car. I hate just going out in the garden and doing these type of stuff. And I compared that to who I was. So I thought I was a bad father. And that was some kind of a revelation, because I can never become that type of father. I must invent a new type of fatherhood. And this brought me then on a trajectory to define a new way I would like to be a father, one with more psychological insight, one who took more interest in the children's inner world, one who, yeah, blah, 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 out of that. So I built an inner image based on my own unique interest and qualities, and started acting from that point. And then, yeah, be and behold, I start liking who I was as a father. And now to disidentification. Disidentification is, I love Ken Wilber's expression, and I believe Ken Wilber took it from another, but it's about turning subjects into objects. subjects is our identifications. We have these identifications that are very often, it's like a mask we wear. It's so close to our face, we cannot see it. Like my father image. I carried that father image so deep in my subconscious, I couldn't see it. And it was all up in my head. And it was judging my lack of particular behavior. And what I did was start bringing it out here, start questioning it, start disidentification, create a gap in your consciousness between the observer and the observed. And in that gap, you start being able to question your belief systems, your identifications. And you also start and being able to accept that it was something you have identified with. So you start becoming a loving observer to your false identifications. Start owning them. And owning them is also saying, yes, I admit I had that false identification. I was actually not authentic in my relationship with my children. I just played out old conditioning. And I'm sorry for that because it made me neglect their internal development because this is actually who I am. I am interested in my daughter's development as a human being, paying attention to what naturally occur in her or emerge in her when we are playing. And so you see, this identification makes it possible to create a more authentic outer identity. And I differentiate between surface identity, that's the outer identity, the roles we play, authentic identity. This is sub-personalities and roles we play, but we have discriminated, we have built them, we are conscious about, we have chosen them. We have said, yes, this is the type of father I want to be. Then we start creating a more authentic identity. But then there is the core identity. And the core identity is me as pure consciousness, me as pure consciousness and will. And this is the final stage of disidentification, because disidentification will reveal our true nature as pure consciousness. It will reveal our true nature as the observer of whatever goes on in our internal psychological environment. The observer is never the observed. Anything we can observe is never me, fundamentally, because I'm always the observer. So whatever I can observe within me is not me, because I'm the observer. So you start creating a gap between the observer and the observed, and that gap allows for love, being empathetic, accepting, holding, create a holding environment for whatever is active within you. But it also makes possible the will, start influencing the sub-personality, starting acting from the authentic part of you and saying no to the inauthentic parts of you. So disidentification is about revealing what the self is at its core. And you cannot understand what the self is through what I'm saying here. You have to have the experience yourself of being a pure witness that is unaffected by the mind stream. Most people are identified with their mind stream, not with the person who is watching the mind stream. That's the big difference, as Julie is pointing to.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's so inspiring. Do you want to say something,
I was going to
Jamie?
say that there's something around this. What you're saying is around like a sensitivity that comes when your energy is not being directed towards yourself and your masks, and like you were talking about your experience of stepping into the role of how your dad was. There was energy going towards that, though you weren't aware of it. That's what was happening.
Yeah.
But then when that started to fall away, energy was freed up to be a lot more sensitive
Yeah.
to who your daughters really are.
Yeah.
So there's just a release of energy that allows you to be more compassionate, more sensitive, and
Yeah.
also more aware of them.
Yeah, and of course it's a process. It's a longer process. We all have revelations and insights, but how often do we really embody them? How often do we really come from them? It's a journey to be able to embody your insights, because there's so much attachment to the old roles, so much security. And also remember, people hold you in a particular identity because people around you, they project images
Yeah.
on you.
What they know,
They-
yeah.
yeah, what they know. So when you starting coming from another part of you, saying stuff that is unfamiliar to them, or then you start acting very crazy sometimes. I come from this working class background. When I had this awakening at 25, I became a vegetarian. I didn't touch any alcohol at all. I had come from a working class background where we really like to drink a lot and party and stuff like that. And suddenly, a new Kenneth emerged, and it was completely different. I
You
simply
betraying the
had to
tribe.
Yeah, I had to cut ties with my whole background and find a new tribe that endorsed that kind of behavior. So this identification makes it possible to change course in life, because you start seeing your behavior from an inner, more detached, impersonal, witnessing place. It's a center, it's a calm center, and you can start making choices. But the way to then be able to act from a new place is long, and this is where the ideal model comes in, because it's very closely tied to the will, because the will need an object to work through. It needs a goal, it needs a purpose. And the ideal model, this inner image of what I would like to be, becomes that inner image you can act on, act from, and then gradually you are stepping into the shoe of who you actually want to be. So our identity is something we both find, but it's also something we create.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the will know where wants to be, where it's going, is directed, is not.
Exactly. When you know where you're going, there's so much easy. It's so much easier to make choices.
My next question, you partially answered it already. And in terms of identification and disidentification, it sounded like you were identified with a role model you inherited from your father, and then when you took a step back, you could disidentify. My question was quite simple. Many people get confused with between disidentification and detachment. My personal experience, when I'm over-identified with something, my husband says to me, "Oh, just let it go, just detach from it. You're too attached." So I would like to hear your views. Why is different? What is the difference between you? You already spoke a little bit about that, but why is different? Disidentification is not the same as detachment.
Well, I will not say it in this way. I will say it in a more moderate way, because disidentification reveals the nature of the self. So, what is the self? From one point of view, it is true that when you when you stabilize your experience as the observer, there is a flavor of detachment. You're no longer so involved in your attachment to this old identity. You start being more free. A better word than detachment is freedom. And that's why I call
Mm-hmm.
disidentification a pathway to freedom. Because when you have all your subs up here and you have them out here, then you're becoming more free of them. So there is an element of detachment.
Mm-hmm.
But I always speak about the self as a loving observer. So there's also a quality of love in the self. And what is love? An ability to accept what is. And if I should give a very quick pointing out, I would say that in order for you to really realize the self, you have to activate the heart center. The heart center is about love, and if you have connection to the heart center, you are able to accept what is within your present experience. You create a loving field, you create a loving atmosphere. It's a calm inner place, and that's related to the heart center. But you also have to develop the observer is related to the third eye, and the third eye
The Ajna
is
chakra.
the Ajna chakra, and it's a more detached place where you are, where you are impersonal, and you are stepping behind, and let me give you an experience of really pure disidentification and experience with the self. I had an experience for about 6 years ago where I developed a severe tinnitus. And one morning I just woke up and I had this screaming sound within my head, and it just continued. And I have to stop all working and just finding out what's going on. And it took me several years to stabilize the situation. I've still tinnitus today, but at a much, much lower. Sometimes I cannot even hear it, but at other times, when my nervous system is stressed, it goes up. But at the high point of this experience with tinnitus, I was really, really down, and it was only 6 years ago. And then I started spontaneously. I started a meditation. I meditated every morning, also when I had tinnitus, just trying to relax my nervous system and my body and finding out what's going on. But then suddenly I started doing a chanting. I was chanting Jesus. And I'm not I'm not very identified with being a Christian as such, but my subconscious, I know it sounds strange, but I have a deep love of Christ and Jesus. So I started chanting Jesus, Jesus, because I was on the brink of insanity. So I was loud. And then suddenly I felt something on top of here, a soft energy, and then a silence. It was not an expanded. I have had many transcendent experiences through my retreats and that kind of background, but it was just a silent, present observation. And me chanting Jesus, I interpreted it as an intervention from my higher self, from me as a higher self, and I simply became totally disidentified from the tinnitus. And I saw, wow, I'm myself. I'm pure witness. And the sound was way, 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 way. I could hardly hear it. And I was just calm, present, mindful. It's very difficult to put words on it, but it was such a healing experience, this presence. And I was the present. It was not something external to me. It was no Jesus figure coming down with spoken words. It was just silent, a silent presence. And then I knew who I was then. I knew I had to stop identifying with the sound. And it was just reality. It's pure reality. It's to be true that you are this witnessing, this ability to just being. Yeah, there's no, because it's a contentless It's a contentless experience. There's no this and this. It's just pure raw nature consciousness. And it lasts perhaps 10 minutes or so, and then the tinnitus came back, but I knew I was not afraid anymore, because what actually made the situation worse was that I became very scared about that sound. And then I was hijacked within that pattern, but this liberated me from one day to another. I simply knew, well, I know I'm consciousness, and I knew it before that experience, but I just, in the face of this annoying sound, I had to really remind myself who I was. And this is what the practice of disidentification help us. It helps us reveal the nature of the self as pure consciousness. Not only pure consciousness, it's also love, it's also will, but this pure consciousness is in a way detached. It is free, it is unbound by all the noise, all the psychological content that continually flows within our environment. And either you have the experience and you know what the self is, and if you have not had the experience of, and I'm not speaking of the higher self now, I'm only speaking of the personal self as this inner state where where you actually know you are the silence. You are the silence, because the self is a silent point of contentless awareness. It's never changing, it's permanent. And these kind of distinctions already anchors that experience in a particular tradition aligned with, both Vedanta, the yogic, Raja Yoga, and all these kinds of philosophies.
Thank you. That's a great example. Jamie had a question here about the Buddha and disidentification. I can't find it, Jamie.
Yeah.
No.
Do you know what?
But
I was just wondering, because we've got so many things you want
we
to
do.
Yeah.
So can I just make a comment about
Yeah.
Jesus then?
Yeah.
And then we can move on. I love that you brought Jesus in, Kenneth, because I think my personal view is that psychosynthesis being a psycho-spiritual, having a psycho-spiritual approach, many of us in the field think about the spiritual part as the Eastern, and it is, but I love Jesus. I'm very fond of Jesus, despite of what
Me too.
we despite what we think about Christianity, and I think we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think Jesus is. He teaches us a lot about this identification. I think he's a really cool guy. Jamie.
Well noted.
Thank you.
I think we've covered now identification, disidentification. Also, we've gone into the personal will. I mean, my one just final point before we go on to the will, which is the final area, was just I think you alluded to it, but this personal self, this sort of still silent consciousness, it's permanent, isn't it? Once you find it, I'm not saying you always access it, but I'm saying it's always there permanently.
Yes.
It doesn't go.
No.
Your awareness of it may fluctuate, but it's there.
Yes.
Yeah, and then that leads you on up to an even higher awareness if you can be with it enough. The will, because this was the third topic that was very close to Assagioli's heart. He even wrote the book on it, but you were mentioning earlier on the will. I suppose, could you just start just saying a little bit about it, just because everybody uses the term the will, but psychosynthesis talks about love and will, and it talks about we need those two qualities, like, to balance. But with the will, we mean something quite specific. Would you like to say a bit more about that?
Yeah. let's go straight to the core. As Jolie pointed out, the difference between having a will and being a will. Having a will is perhaps the first stage is our experience that we have no will. We are simply just the plaything of circumstances. And we have an experience of having no agency at all. We just live up to the expectations and of society, our surroundings, and we pretty much take life as it comes. So it's a quite deterministic way of looking. I believe, I have no control of the most important things in my life. But then at some point we can have a revelation that I can actually say no and yes to things. I can start influencing my life. I can start deciding who I want to relate to, what type of job I want, and we start feeling a kind of agency. And it's especially when we develop the more critical, analyzing mind, we also live in a society. If we live in a free society where that is celebrated, the individual who choose his or her own life, then we can pretty much experience having a will at some point. It's not the same thing as being able to really master yourself, because this is what psychosenses points to, that actually finding yourself, discovering yourself, you also discover that you both discover that you can start having a kind of love affair with your subpersonalities. We speak a lot about the I-self connection, the connection between the personal self and the higher self, but we should speak much more about the I-part relation, the relationship we have with all our subpersonalities. Because developing that relationship with myself as a father, myself as a man, and myself as a teacher, all these roles we play. When we start developing that I-part relationship, we exercise our will by choosing how we want to show up in the world. And that is what I was trying to explain with me and my development of my father role in life. I made a choice. I will not be that father. I would rather be that father. And then I worked on embodying these qualities in relation to my daughter and my family. So choice come in. Will is pretty much related to being able to make free choices. But we can all speak about how free are we? How free are we? We are free to, in my opinion, to choose our inborn nature. We are not free to not choose who we are. That will turn into misery, or we will, if we try to show up as something we are not, we will really face misery and depression, and because it's very difficult
We can't
to not be.
we can't ignore our dharma. Is that what you're
No,
basically?
exactly,
Creates the misery.
exactly. So the will is the power to choose who we want to become, and that faculty of choice is part of the self, because when we have found the self as the observer, then we have found that center where we step back, are becoming a center, and we can start observing all these types of behavior we have in various circumstances. And then we can start influencing. We can say no to that kind of behavior, because in many situations we have competing impulses within us. Someone shows up and start insulting me in the public. My let me say, my primal apart from the working class background will get an impulse. I'm gonna kick him in the stomach or fight him. That's one impulse, aggression. I realize it, I accept it, I own it, I have that kind of impulse in me, but I can choose not to come from my working class self. I choose instead to come from a more calmer. So you see, discovering the will is discovering that you can have choice in how
Mm.
you show up in the world. You start having some kind of a control, you start having some kind of a mastery. That's all related to having a will. You start becoming a leader in your life. That's about self leadership. Uh, but there's a deeper element of the will that is very deep, ingrained in the self. It is the self, and it is the will to be. The will to be is a pure energy that insists on being you, and you could call it the voice of authenticity. You could call it an inner demanding impulse to step up, to step out, to show your face. It's the call of duty, it's the pressure of Dharma, it's the evolution itself, and it comes from the higher self, but through the personal self. So it's an inner force that connects you with dignity, a dignity of being you.
And can I just ask,
Mm.
just to confirm that as well, as I'm understanding what you're saying, there's almost like there's two wills, or there's two sources of will. There's
Yes,
there's a will that I suppose comes from, I want to say, perhaps the personal self, but correct me if I've got that wrong. But what you were just describing then on the back end of that conversation was like the will that comes from this very high, almost like the soul, almost thing, a higher self, whatever
yes,
you want to call it. That
yes,
that almost, it just has so much power. It directs you if you listen to it. It doesn't override you, but if you
no,
listen to it, it steers you in that. It's almost like a Dharma force if you want to uh,
yes.
follow it. Is that right? Has me just
That's
characterizing
exact.
that?
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm speaking about. What as Jolie called, there's a pull and there's a push from the transpersonal will, because let's remember the higher self is not some other entity. It's me. When we have an experience of ourselves as a higher self, we realize ourselves to be a universal individual being, a divine being with universal consciousness, but with a particular mission and dharma in life. And that mission is to show up and be who you are. So it's a deep, deep call. And of course, you can totally forget about it. You can be an alcoholic. You can be attached to all kind of distracting ways, so you are not listening to that voice. But anyone who have started to ask the question, "Who am I?" in a really deep ground, will start resonating to that impulse, which is actually the divine self acting through you as a personality. And that divine self is demanding you to bring out the love you have, the joy you have, the power you have to create a better world. Because remember, the soul always have a view of humanity as a whole. It has this big, big, big outlook and knows exactly what his role is in life, just as Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita and knew that he has to
Mm.
take on the battle and fight these family members. And why? Because it was his duty.
Mm.
That's the message of the Bhagavad Gita. It's your duty to show up in this way and take on that battle. And we have a duty, and that's the will, this sense of power and dignity, that I have something valuable to bring. And the story is that if I'm not showing up, if I'm not radiating my qualities, nobody else can take my
Mm.
place. There's simply no one else. So there is a void within the collective intelligence where nobody else can fill. You have to step into these shoes. That's the will. When you have found that will, and you have found that will when you recognize that you have what I call self initiated growth. You have found your own fire. You're not waiting for something external to to enter your life and pull you out of your misery. You have found your own core, you have found your own fire for development. And the initiative you take from that fire will really transform your life. That's the will. The will is like a fire that has started to burn within the heart center of you, a fire of liberation, a fire of identity, a fire of becoming all you are capable of.
Mm.
Yeah, very much. It's
Wow.
hard to stand in that sometimes, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually really haunting you, like the Hound of Heaven in Assagioli's
Yeah.
words in his famous poems. It's something when you know you have a duty and you have accepted it, then it's just pushing you and
Yeah.
pushing you, and you have so many elements in your personality that you don't want to do it because it always comes with a price. The will comes with the price of death. That's the price we have to pay. It's
You have to
pure death.
die.
We have to die from all our attachment to people who likes us, and we fear that they will abandon us, and all these external fears, they simply have to die away.
But it's also the most it doesn't need to necessarily to happiness. It can lead to happiness. It doesn't have to, but it
No,
leads to a sort of internal contentment. I've had these conversations with Lara before. If you know that you're supposed to be doing something, even if it is an absolute ball ache getting it's better to be, you feel confident and comfortable because you know in yourself you need to be doing that.
yeah,
It's this feeling of contentment. It doesn't promise happiness or anything like
no,
that, but you're aligned.
yeah.
Mm.
I really like that. It's a contentment, yes. It's a calm, but it's a calm power of doing the right thing. It's
Mm.
a, and it can be while there's almost also fear and sadness, and because the consequences of saying no or yes in a particular situation can be quite dire. And I
Yeah.
think that's why we are so afraid of the will. And as Jolie said it very clearly, the will function is the last function we are going to know, because it demands this sacrifice of all our false identifications, and that's not it's not very comfortable work.
Mm. But I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest gift of psychosynthesis, hence the name of our channel, the gift of psychosynthesis, is to work therapeutically with the will. And like you mentioned before, like when you see the clients making those small changes or having that divorce or repairing or finding applying for the job, also reminds me that it sounds quite a big step, this death you invite us to trust and embrace. But it is also, it can be microdose. We can microdose when the will, and then we see this a small change. We meeting the client and ourselves as well, where we are, and
Yes,
having those next small will steps, and they become quite powerful. Yeah.
that's right. We can do microdosing, but we just have to not deceive our clients. When people start saying yes to an authentic voice, game is
Mm.
over. When we have,
It's
when
no
we
going
first
back.
no, there's no way going back because you start listening to truth. Remember, as Jolie speaks of these experiences as the truth, as facts, as reality. And we can try hide from reality. The will is a reality, and it's the reality that you have to be who you are, period. There's no way around it. You can play hide and seek. You're welcome to do that, and it's also okay, because it can be quite, frightening to do what you are here to do. But when we just give it, a little finger, it takes the whole body. So there's no turning back when we start peeling layers of our identity and find these core essence qualities
Yeah.
and energies.
So I've got one final question, and I think then Lara might have a question. These might be the last two, but my one is, I suppose, what I'm interested in is what you think, or maybe what Assagioli would say about the state of modern therapies, and what are they missing? Given everything we've just been talking about, what do you think they might be missing?
Well, that's pretty simple. They are missing the self. And as a Jolie, in a conversation with Stuart Miller, he was one of the directors of Esalen. He had a lot of visitors in his final days, and as Jolie was so stunned by modern psychologists, and he said many of these high renowned psychologists, they don't know their self. They speak about the ego as a bundle of energies, a composition of mental, emotional. So all their identity, all their perception of the self is tied up to the psychological functions. They haven't found that still center within, and it's amazing that people who have done so much introspection, they have not found the most immediate experience of them all, the pure nature of the observer, of consciousness itself. And if we have not found that center, and remember that center is reality. It's not a theory. It's pure. It's inside. Everyone have it. So that's what they are missing, because if we don't have a center, how do we synthesize? Yes, we can synthesize around a subpersonality, but it will always be very partial. When we have found the center, when we have found the self as pure consciousness, love and will, then we have found we have gotten life skills to really live a meaningful life, and we are on a path to start mastering all the various influences that we are embedded in. And no, there's never been a time in history where people have been so impacted by external energies from online media. And we are bombarded 24/7 with all these ideas, and so we have to find a place where we know who we are. This is what psychotherapy is not speaking about, this center, because it's difficult. You have to have a pointing out to it. And that's why I have this enthusiasm about psychosynthesis and the 7 core experiences, because if you have understood what they are pointing to, and then you have started having the experience, you are simply on firm ground, because you start to know reality. What's fact? You're no longer mystified about, is there a self, or no, because you have the inner experience of it. But you cannot transmit it. It's like the color blue. How will you explain what blue is to a blind person? It's simply not or a person who have never been in water. How will you explain how the sensation of swimming? It's simply, you have to do the introspection yourself and find this place. and there you will find
You
freedom.
can't read a theory about how to swim
No,
and how it feels to swim.
no, you cannot.
You have to get into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Kenneth, where can people find you and what you're offering at the moment?
Yes, go to my website, kennethsorensen.dk, and then you /en for English and slash. There's also small flags on the top there. You go to my English side is the most developed because I have so many translated. I believe we have around 500 articles on the website, Danish, Norwegian, but most of them English translations of Assagioli's articles. So if you really want to know about
We'll have
psychosynthesis,
we'll have it on the links on the description of this
yeah.
video. Sorry, yeah.
And of course, there's also my YouTube channel, Psychosynthesis Self Mastery, where there's a lot of videos and interviews with people from the psychosynthesis community.
Wonderful,
So
wonderful content, really inspiring. Yeah, yeah.
thank you for having me. It was such a
So
pleasure.
I want to acknowledge you, Kenneth, because when Jamie and I this YouTube channel Jamie and I created, the intention, that's when you're describing the will, that's what happened to us. We had this conversation and we wanted to create something. We really felt the call, the dharma, Jamie might say, to create something, and all those sub-personalities like voices trying to tell us, are you good enough to do this? But we trusted the call, but we didn't know your YouTube channel when we started 2 years ago. We are recording this now is August 2026. 2 years ago when we had the first interview with Roger Evans, who trusted us enough to get us starting. We didn't know about your channel. And then when I saw you, I had your book and I used on my essays. But when personally, I don't know about Jamie, when I saw, I thought, oh my God, look what he's doing. I feel such an amateur. But then, I quickly disidentified and I found a lot of inspiration, and you were one of the first people to comment, actually. So I want to thank you for that, but also acknowledge all the work you're doing, for you to really listening to that advice there in 1988 about the meditation and never stopping, really using the will of their working class parents gave to you to keep doing and sharing and yeah. So we are really honored to have you. And also it was such a pleasant not surprise but a pleasant experience to meet you at the summer school of the EPA, and you were so warm, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
I really would. It was great to meet you, and I've just really enjoyed it today. I feel we just covered a lot of ground, but I think the way you were expressing it is really passionately put. I think that will hopefully resonate with a lot of people. And either if they're into this already, they'll go deeper, or if they're not, it'll just make them want to dip their toe in a bit more and listen and think about some of the experiences that you've had in your life and how it's led you to where you are. So it's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And thank you to the two of you. And I really believe it's a beautiful, relevant work to do these interviews and just bring the word out. And I will, of course, share this episode with my followers. So let me know when the video is out, and then let's bring it out to everyone here and there.
And yeah, good luck with your book about Assagioli, and we would love to have a conversation, an episode about Assagioli with you. That would be when you're ready, if you're willing.
Look out for a good someone who can write and bring alive Assagioli, as we've discussed, and I think you could be the one. So it'll be great to talk to you.
Let's hope so. I'm quite pleased at the moment, but you never know.
No, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hang in there till it's done.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Go well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.